Okay, what's up? How's it going? I haven't done one of these videos for a very long time, and I just recently picked up the Omega Speedmaster Professional. This is a sapphire sandwich. I'm gonna do a comparison video between this and the Rolex Daytona Cosmograph reference 116520. And here's a side-by-side close-up picture, and there's, in terms of pricing, there's no comparison, right? This Daytona probably on the secondary market can go up to like 16,000 US dollars, whereas this can be had for around 4,000 US dollars, right? Is the Rolex Daytona worth 4 times the price of the sapphire sandwich? It's got an exhibition case back, shows a 1863 movement. This is just a plain blank steel case back. So, let me talk about both watches, right? And let's start with the Omega Speedmaster. So this is the reference. Well, I don't know, there's just too many numbers right now, these references, but it's a 2017 watch, and 1863 movement, sapphire case back, sapphire crystal. I mean, it's the moon watch, right? It's iconic, it's timeless, it's a great watch. Steel bracelet. Now, one thing, the Speedmaster is a Speedmaster, right? But the one thing that really cheesed me off with this is the bracelet. So you see here they have screws, right? So I just picked this up and I tried to remove a couple links, and it turns out that these screws, they don't go all the way through. These are just caps. So there's a cap here, there's a cap on either side, and then there's a pin in between. So it's just such a pain to remove links, right? Just kind of almost got to take it to a watchmaker, and God forbid you drop one of these screws because they're so small. And that actually really kind of annoys me. I thought Omega always kind of wants to be in Rolex's league, right? If you want to be so, then you gotta freaking sort out your bracelet, make it easy to remove these links. I was kind of happy that I thought they improved it. It's just a screw, kind of like a Rolex Oyster bracelet. Just, unscrew it, remove it, comes off. But no, there's a pin in between as well. So that kind of really annoyed me. Other than that, it's a Speedmaster, right? It's a great watch. Iconic, timeless design. This is my first sapphire sandwich. I've owned pretty much every Speedmaster movement ever made, right? I've owned a 321. I've owned 2 of those. I had an Ed White and I had a 1967. I forgot what the reference number is. 321 movement. I've had the 861 movement from the 70s. I had the 1861 movement from the first Omega in space. Probably had a bunch in between as well. But this will be my first 1863 movement, my first sapphire sandwich Omega Speedmaster Professional. And it's well finished, right? It's a very well finished watch. There's some perlage on that Omega. Sorry guys, I'm not a movement buff, but that plate over there, I don't know what you want to call that, please excuse me. All right, I probably should know some basic parts to the movement. Maybe this will kind of encourage me to learn a little bit more, right? Now that I can see all the parts. It's a nice movement, right? It's pretty well finished. The pushers, right? Very smooth, very supple. All right, beautiful watch. What you would expect out of Omega Speedmaster. Right. And now we move on to the Rolex Daytona. 116520, straightforward. Well, I shouldn't say straightforward. This is creme de la creme when it comes to Rolex sports professional watches. In order to start the chronograph, you gotta unscrew the pushers. It feels great, right? In terms of the feel, the Daytona definitely feels better. The Omega Speedmaster, the pushers, just feels a little more, I don't know how to, there's a little bit more depth. You know, there's a click, there's a sense of, it just feels that when you push on the Rolex Daytona, more pieces, there are more parts within the movement involved. Whereas with the Speedmaster, when you press the pusher, when you start a chronograph, it feels like only maybe 2 or 3 parts are involved, you know, they're moving. Of course you reset, but with the Daytona, when you press it, it's just crisper. Boom, you know, the tolerance seems a little lesser compared to the Speedmaster. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just trying to justify, you know, why this costs 4 times more than Omega Speedmaster. But I mean, in terms of wrist presence, right? Even though this is a 42mm watch and it wears really big, right? The Speedmaster is a big watch. The Daytona is just, I hate to say it, it's just kind of, it has this aura that a Speedmaster just doesn't have. You know, you wear a Daytona, it's a heavy hitting watch, right? It really is. Love it or hate it, I guess it's a victim of its own success. You know, it is. There's a reason why it's so highly coveted. I love the Daytona, right? I find that the Omega Speedmaster is just a little bit too broad sideways. You know, it's a chunk. If you're into big watches, right? If you like larger watches, the Speedmaster is really the way to go. But the Daytona, I just feel is just so much more slender. You know, the curves are a lot more subtle. I think a lot of people, when they first get a Daytona, I know I did when I first picked it up, I was kind of surprised at how small it actually was relative to the Speedmaster, right? Because I'm pretty sure everybody who, you know, when they get into hot horology, right, proper wrist watches, they start with the Speedmaster first, right? So this is their reference, right? This is the initial reference point, right? You probably picked this up first. You spent maybe upwards of $3,000 to $4,000 US. That's a lot of money, and you know, it's a lot of wrist presence, right? It's a big watch, and then, you know, people tend to explore different options. You get further into the hobby, you pick up your first Rolex, you kind of get hooked. Yeah, you kind of get bit by the Rolex bug. Like here, right? You got a Yachtmaster that I have, you know, and you just start to really appreciate Rolexes, and you realize that, you know, you want to experience ownership of the Rolex Daytona. I managed to pick one up many years ago. You get it, and then you realize, hey, man, this is actually a really small watch, right, compared to this. And you look at the size difference, it's quite noticeable, right? So the question is, right, is the Rolex Daytona worth over 4 times the price of a Omega Speedmaster? That's something that only, I guess, you can answer for yourself. For me, I say yes, right? Simply because Rolex has stopped producing this particular version of the Daytona with the steel bezel. They don't make these anymore, whereas Omega, they just pump these out, right? That's the problem with Omega. The Speedmaster is a cash cow, right? They just pump these out like there's so many different versions, and don't get me wrong, it's a great watch, but it's definitely not as rare as the Rolex Daytona. So I feel that you should experience ownership of both. Whether you keep it in your collection or not, I don't know, right? But I try to hold on to Daytona a little longer than the Speedmaster. Right? The Speedmaster always tend to come in and out of my collection. Is this a keeper? Probably not. You know, I just wanted to complete my Omega Speedmaster journey. Now I can say I've owned and experienced ownership of all the Omega Speedmasters. Is this my favorite? Well, it's the prettiest one in terms of case spec, that's for sure. It's the most engaging Speedmaster. But I would have to say my favorite Speedmaster still has to be a Caliber 321, right? The Ed White. That was a fantastic watch. Although vintage is really not for me, because I tend to be a little bit rougher with my watches. I spend a lot of time in the water. My climate in the Pacific Northwest is very damp, it's very wet, so it wasn't really appropriate or suitable for my lifestyle and my environment. I have to say, I think the first Omega in space was probably my favorite modern iteration of the Speedmaster, and that's only because I really love my vintage Ed White Speedmaster, which I sold. But you know, Daytona is king, I have to say. Love it or hate it, right? Once you have both in your hands, you kind of understand why this watch is worth more than the Omega Speedmaster, right? So anyway, that's just my personal opinion, my review on both watches. Fantastic watches, right? Both of them, right? Have one in either in your collection, and you know, consider yourself very fortunate, right? I consider myself very, very lucky to have experienced ownership of both these watches. But I'm definitely leaning towards the Rolex Daytona. Okay, anyway, thanks for watching. I'm out. Bye.